what really happens when we die? I mean, it's the ultimate mystery, right? It's a question every single one of us has probably wrestled with at some point. It's a topic just wrapped in faith and fear and so much speculation. But what if the answer was a lot more direct and maybe even more surprising than you thought? See, today we're going to explore a very specific perspective that asks this exact bold question, and it claims to have a definitive answer. All right, let's get right into it. Now, full disclosure, everything we're about to talk about is drawn directly from the arguments found inside these two religious pamphlets. Our goal here isn't to endorse them or debate them, but just to unpack the specific viewpoint they're presenting. We're just looking at what they have to say. So, to really get their view on death, we actually have to back up a step. We first have to understand their definition of life, or more specifically, what these pamphlets teach it even means to be a human being in the first place. And this right here, this is a really fundamental shift in thinking. A lot of traditions teach that we have a soul, like an immortal spirit living inside a temporary body, right? But these pamphlets, they argue something completely different. They say a human being is a living soul, the whole package, a complete unified person. This is basically their core formula. It's pretty simple. You take the dust of the ground, that's the physical body, and you combine it with the breath of life from God. Put those two together and you get one living soul. So the crucial takeaway here is that in this view, the soul isn't some separate thing that can just float off on its own. Nope, it is the person, alive and whole. Okay, so if a person is a living soul only when the body and the breath of life are combined, well, what happens when they separate at the moment of death? That's the logical next question, right? And that brings us to our next section, the state of the dead. And the answer, according to this material, is really direct and, honestly, maybe a little startling. They say death is a state of total unconsciousness. We're talking no thoughts, no awareness, no existence in any conscious form whatsoever. Now, to back this idea up, the pamphlets point to passages just like this one from Ecclesiastes. And you can see it describes a state of just complete shutdown. No work, no plans, no knowledge. It even says that these powerful human emotions, love, hatred, they've perished. The central message is pretty stark, isn't it? The dead know nothing. Here we see a really key metaphor they use throughout the pamphlets. They point out that when Jesus' friend Lazarus died, he didn't say, "Oh, his soul has gone to heaven." Nope. Instead, he said, "Our friend Lazarus sleepeth." And the pamphlets argue that he used the word sleep as a direct one-to-one synonym for death. A temporary state of rest that you can be woken up from. Okay, hold on. This raises a super obvious question, right? If the dead are completely unconscious, just asleep, then what's the deal with ghosts? Or mediums? Or all the people who claim they're communicating with departed loved ones? Well, the pamphlets have a very specific explanation for all that. Their whole argument on this actually goes all the way back to what they call Satan's very first lie, back in the Garden of Eden. So when God said the penalty for disobedience was death, the serpent flat out contradicted him, saying, "You will not surely die." The pamphlets basically frame the entire idea of an immortal soul, a part of you that lives on right after death, as just an extension of that original lie. So here's the step-by-step logic they present. It's pretty clear. Step 1, the dead are unconscious, so they can't communicate. Simple enough. Therefore, step 2, any supposed communication from them has to be a deception. And step 3, the source of that deception, according to this view, is demonic spirits who are impersonating the dead, all to mislead people. But look, this state of unconscious sleep isn't where the story ends. Not at all. The pamphlets present a final, really hopeful resolution, and that brings us to the ultimate resurrection. This timeline really lays out the whole journey, just as the pamphlets see it. First, you have life, where a person is a living soul. Then death comes, which is just an unconscious sleep in the grave. And finally, way down the road, at a future event they call Christ's second coming, the righteous dead are resurrected. They're woken up, so to speak. And this moment of resurrection, they describe it as something instantaneous. I mean, it's not some slow, ghostly process. The quote says it all. In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, the dead will be raised incorruptible. So in this view, the body and the breath of life are slammed back together, reunited, and the living soul lives again. But this time it's in a perfected, immortal form. And there's one final key point they really emphasize. universal accountability. They state that 100%, everyone who has died, both righteous and unrighteous, will face a final review, judged by God for the lives they lived. So in this view, there are absolutely no exceptions. Nobody gets a pass. So there you have it. We've unpacked the argument from these pamphlets that death is an unconscious sleep, not an immediate journey for some immortal soul. And that leaves us with a final thought to chew on. How might believing in soul sleep versus an immortal soul change your perspective on life and death? I mean, does it make your actions in this life more or less significant? It's a really big question, and it gets to the very heart of how we live and why we live the way we do.